Good morning and welcome to this short presentation where I'll tell you what to do if a project has failed and how to use that experience to build your image as a professional project manager, as well as how to look after the interests of the team whose morale after such a failed project is bound to be low. Let's start with the fact that the natural reflex when a project fails, when the atmosphere is tense, there's nervousness and frustration, is the human instinct to look for someone to blame. However, we shouldn't do that, and we shouldn't allow anyone on the project team to look for a culprit. It's a mistake. Such a witch hunt destroys morale and team trust, and that damaged morale and trust will carry over to future projects which we don't want. We want to get as much as possible out of this failed project, but we don't want to carry those bad emotions over to the next projects, so we don't look for someone to blame, and just as importantly, we don't blame the system. The problem is that something happened in the project and we need to track down what it was. And now we turn this operating room into a kind of laboratory, meaning that we do not simply look for a culprit or rush to pass judgment, but instead we try to look at the situation with greater understanding and insight. We carefully examine exactly what happened and what the consequences were, why something occurred, and how we can change it in the future. All of this is done without pointing fingers. However, to conduct this well, to carry out this experiment properly, you as the project manager have a role to play here, which is to find all the evidence, gather the facts, collect the original project plans, get system logs if possible, and gather key decisions and risks. What did we do about those risks? How did the project progress over time? So that we can base our discussion at the post-mortem meeting on facts and separate them from opinions. Every time opinions like I think or in my view come up during the meeting, we should interrupt them politely and say, okay, those are opinions, but let's work with facts. Because working with facts will allow us to reach the causes of this project's failure. Whereas working with opinions usually ends in arguments and misunderstandings within the project team. At the start of such a meeting, once we've organized it, we should state very clearly that everyone did the best job they could, given the knowledge and resources they had. And that is a principle that everyone must agree on and that we must stick to. And just like every time during such a meeting, if someone were to try to shift the blame onto individuals, we must react and remind everyone that we agreed that everyone truly did their absolute very best in this important work, and that they genuinely did everything they possibly could, leaving no stone unturned in their efforts. During this meeting, it's worth focusing not on what happened, because we already know that, but on why it happened. And if we have specific outcomes in the project that we want to define why they occurred, then let's focus on those why questions. And let's focus on them repeatedly, meaning we should apply the well-known 5 whys method here to get to the deep root of the problem rather than settling for surface level answers or surface level effects, because we want to diagnose where the problem truly lies, not just where, well, it seems to us the problem lies because, I don't know, for example, the procedures are complicated. Well, that doesn't solve anything, but if we dig deeper, talk about it and search, then we are able to find certain ideas and concepts that will be ready to use in the next project. However, to be able to measure the impact these ideas and concepts had on the next project, we must identify them very clearly. It's not enough to say that we need to test better. It's worth saying, it's worth specifying this point about needing to test better, for example, in such a way that in the next project, we allocate 10% of the budget to testing infrastructure. And Anna is responsible for this, and leave it at that. And then instead of a generalization that you don't know what to do with, well, the next project starts, we have to test better, but what does that mean? And so we have to go back to that conversation. So if we're already talking here fresh after the project about what could have been done differently, we can identify it very precisely. And now, because we identified it very precisely after the next project, we'll be able to answer the question of whether this action brought the desired results or not. Another important task for a project manager is rebuilding or building trust among stakeholders. And now here we have two approaches. The simple one, which I don't recommend, which is looking for someone to blame. Well, you found someone to blame, you send that info to stakeholders, and they'll likely say, oh, he's avoiding responsibility, and basically the project failed and you haven't learned any lessons. Therefore, instead of looking for culprits and pointing fingers, prepare a list of things after this post-mortem meeting. What didn't work, why it didn't work, and what your plan is for future projects. This is much better for stakeholders, and it shows that you really know what you're doing. And even though the project didn't work out, you learned a lesson from it. And in the next project, you want to do things differently, meaning you learn from your mistakes. You don't repeat them twice. So to summarize, once again, a short checklist, which is don't look for someone to blame. Instead of judging, carefully look for what happened and how to do it more effectively, how to improve it in the future. Base it on data, not on opinions. Remember that everyone put into the project as much as they could based on their knowledge, experience, and skills. Use the 5 whys technique when asking why something happened during the post-mortem meeting, and prepare a plan for future projects where you will fix or you will try as a project team to fix what didn't go well in this project. And remember that failure is just a set of data. What you do with it is up to you. And in the comments, please briefly leave a comment about what things you learned from projects that perhaps didn't quite turn out the way you wanted. Best regards and see you soon. Bye.